I received the heartbreaking news that all military spouses, families dread. And it was Scotty's commanding officer. And through broken tears and sobs, this strong leader, stoic man began to deliver the most heartbreaking news. He shared with me that Scotty, had come face to face with a suicide car bomb, and that man detonated the car, sending shrapnel into both of Scotty's eyes, he said. And I looked at them and I said, no, I'm not signing it. They sort of looked at me confused because they had never had someone tell them no. They looked at me really confused and they said, Mrs. Smiley, your husband has no eyes. There has never been someone to serve on active duty completely blind. And they pushed it in front of me and said, sign the paperwork. And I just looked at them again and said, no. Yes. And I think that's important as women, or for women, especially now. We need our voices to be heard.
Hi, Tiffany.
Hi, Tammy. Good to see you and be with you today.
Oh, that's so nice. We've barely met. We really don't really know much about each other, except for I listened to your story one day for about only a few minutes, right? You just recounted an amazing story, and I asked you if you'd be on my podcast. So thank you very much for coming.
Yes.
And why don't we just get started with you telling people who you are, what you've been doing, and how long you've been doing it for?
Yes, I'm a small town farm girl from Pasco, Washington, in Washington State. And, didn't grow up with much, but I grew up with a lot of experiences. Out on the farm, we learned how to work hard, how to take care of our animals. I raised steers and beef and rode horses, and learned really from a young age true grit and hard work. And I had no idea, where that would lead me or how valuable that would become in my life. But one thing I always wanted to do or be, I guess, as a little girl, when people ask, what do you want to be when you grow up? I always said a nurse or a doctor. I just wanted to help people. And why that was in my spirit at such a young age, I don't really know. And so, graduating high school, I just always knew I'm going to be a nurse. But in high school, I met this very special boy named Scotty Smiley. And for me, meeting Scotty, he, besides being an incredible human being, he was destined for greatness. And in some ways I saw this is a way to a whole new world. This is me and Scotty are going to experience and see so much in this world. Like, I'm going to get off the farm. I'm going to experience life. And so after I graduated with my bachelor's in science and nursing, I married Scotty Smiley, who was my high school sweetheart. And really, that's when our lives really sort of took off, or in a way, took a path of the unknown. Scotty was a newly commissioned officer from the United States Military Academy, and I was a nurse. In some regards, it was the absolute picture of the American dream. That this young officer from the military academy, this new nurse, the future was very bright. And of course, all of that changed. And truly, why we are talking here today is because of what happened in Scotty's and in my service to this country. Scotty was after we were married, he was very quickly deployed to Mosul, Iraq, for over a year-long deployment. And about 6 months into that deployment, I received the heartbreaking news that all military spouses, families dread. I was awoken out of bed at, around 4 a.m. My phone rang and I was excited because Scotty would call at all different times while he was deployed. And so I had a nursing shift that day and I thought, well, this is exciting. I get to talk to him before I head into my busy day of helping people. Except this time when I answered the phone, it was someone else's voice on the other end of the line. And it was Scotty's commanding officer. And through broken tears and sobs, this strong leader, stoic man began to deliver the most heartbreaking news. He shared with me that Scotty, had come face to face with a suicide car bomb, and that man detonated the car, sending shrapnel into both of Scotty's eyes. He said, Scotty's flatlined several times. The shrapnel is in both of his eyes. He said, we just loaded him on a Black Hawk helicopter. Hopefully someone calls you from Balad, Iraq. That was the day that changed everything for me as a spouse, as a wife, as a mother in the future, even in the work I'm doing now. It's certainly I would say, that pivotal moment where really we were both, me and Scotty, were given a choice of what we were going to do. At that point, I didn't know if Scotty was going to live or die. A doctor did call me from Balad, Iraq, and he said, I've stabilized him. He seems stable right now, but he has no eyes. He will never, ever see again. And in some regards, I wondered, is death better? Scotty was destined for greatness. He was in the peak of his life. He was strong. He, was a combat scuba diver, ranger, headed to the top tiers. And I thought, how am I going to say this to him? How are we going to live our lives? But I made a couple decisions that day. I resigned from my nursing job. I quit my nursing job and I took a one-way flight out to Walter Reed Army Medical Center in Washington, D.C.
Did you talk to anybody? Did you talk to anyone before you quit your job? No?
I called my doctors.
Right. But just the people you had to talk to?
Yes, just the people I had to talk to. Mm-hmm. And I said, I'm not going to be coming back. I knew this would take everything in me. And took a one-way flight from Washington State to Washington, D.C., and to meet Scotty, to be there once his casualty evacuation arrived in Washington, D.C., and thus began my fight for something better, not just for Scotty, but for all of our service members, for our future, for our kids, for this country. I realized just the broken bureaucracy that can set up roadblocks in front of good people, and how difficult that was. Thank goodness I was a nurse, and I wasn't intimidated by the medical system. I wasn't afraid of talking with doctors and advocating. In fact, my whole education was built on taking care of patients and being their advocate and fighting for them. And so, when I was greeted at Walter Reed, I had power of attorney. And so the doctors, social workers, high-ranking military officials brought me into a room. And they said, Mrs. Smiley, you have power of attorney. And your husband is, very, very seriously injured. We're going to need to, start looking for long-term care facilities for him. Sign right here on the dotted line, and we will get him out of active service and into the VA, the VA program. So sign right here, and this will begin the process. And I looked at them and I said, no, I'm not signing it. They sort of looked at me confused because they had never had someone tell them no.
Would you tell my viewers what the VA program is so that they know what you were facing?
Yes. So the VA is the government system that is built for our veterans, the Veterans Administration. And it is built to care for those who have served our country. And it's it's grown to be a very, very large government program. A lot of funding. Unfortunately, a lot of that funding fails to trickle down to the people who need it the most. And I'm not talking about doctors or healthcare providers within the VA. There are many, many wonderful people within the system, but the system was completely broken.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew if I signed that paperwork that it almost would be a death sentence for my husband. We weren't making very much money. I had just quit my job. They were willing to throw a few dollars our way. At that point, he was only a first lieutenant. They don't make that much money. And I had a lot of questions for the Veterans Administration. I needed a lot of questions to be answered, and they just simply couldn't answer them. And so I said, no, I'm going to find a new way, a pathway that's better for my husband. I'm not signing it. And they looked at me really confused, and they said, Mrs. Smiley, your husband has no eyes. There has never been someone to serve on active duty completely blind. And they pushed it in front of me and said, sign the paperwork. And I just looked at them again and said, no, I'm not signing it. And really, that was the day that I began to forge a path, a new path, a path that was full of hope versus despair, a path that was full of opportunity versus obstacles. And I would walk into my husband's room every day and just speak truth and hope and life. I told him all the things he could be in a world where everyone was telling him everything he could not be. And so I would sneak him out of the hospital and take him on a track, and we would walk, and he would get stronger and stronger. It was just like little steps every single day to get him stronger and stronger and stronger. And we went through many battles and many fights with the government. And, I built a team who believed in this vision, and Scotty made a miraculous recovery. And then we petitioned the Army, and Scotty, was granted to him to stay on active duty. And he became the first blind active duty officer to ever serve our country, something that had never, ever been done before. Mm-hmm. But I think, for me as a wife and a military wife, I dealt with a lot of grief, additional grief, being at Walter Reed. And I remember a moment there where I just crumpled on the floor, because at night I would walk the halls and I would see everyone else. And I would think, who is helping them? Like, I knew I could help Scotty. That was in my capacity.
How did you know that? How did you know that? I have to ask that.
I'm a Christian, and I do believe it was my relationship with the Lord, and God just put it on my heart. I knew that, that with God, there was nothing that could stop us. There was nothing. And I just, every morning I would wake up and I would say, what do you want me to say? What do you want me to do? And it was always truth. It was always hope. It was always life. And it was like, tell Scotty everything he could be. And so I would tell him, you're going to be a speaker someday. You're going to be a teacher. You're going to write a book. And he would say, I'm so pathetic right now. I can't even get out of bed. I can't even go to the bathroom by myself. Like, what are you talking about, Tiffany? I said, you are going to make an impact in people's lives someday. And he would say, look at me. I'm a mess. I can't even see. I can't even do anything alone. What are you talking about? And I would just come back the next day and say the same things. And I believed it to my core. I believed he could even stay on active duty to my core. And when you have that sort of belief, absolutely nothing can stop you from standing up and living out your purpose. And not just that, but to impact other people's lives. I talked about that moment of knowing I could help Scotty, but what about everyone else? So I knew once Scotty was good, I could go help other people. But it was overwhelming as a nurse. And I think even as a woman, we are built to hedge protection for others. We are built to care and have that emotional support for others. That's how we are created. It's what makes us amazing. And it was so hard for me to feel like I couldn't help other people. But the amazing thing is we were able to do that and so much more. And when, I think back on that grief and the weight that I felt and the pain, I still had that vision that, once Scotty's well enough, we're going to come back and we're going to make it right for everyone else. And we're
That's
going
a
to
prayer.
fight.
That
And
sounds like a prayer,
yes,
right? Mm-hmm.
yes, very much so.
Mm-hmm.
And the, amazing thing, and I believe, God did not have to show us here on earth a glimpse of those prayers answered, but
Mm-hmm.
he did. He did. Scotty went on to be an incredible teacher. He went back and taught at the United States Military Academy and then taught in ROTC programs, teaching and mentoring our future leaders of this country. He wrote a book. He's an
He
incredible
wrote a book.
speaker. He speaks all over the world.
Mm-hmm.
And I am always so humbled by that, because we didn't God didn't have to show us that what he told me to go in and say every day to Scotty, he didn't have to show us that in a full circle moment here on earth, but he did.
Mm-hmm.
And it just it makes our family even more fearless.
That's an amazing story. And so, what is your role now that he's recuperated?
Yeah.
He's gone beyond that. He's, you know, grabbed life and he's going forward. What's your role in all of this now?
Yes. Well, I would say, being a mother to our three amazing boys. We
Mm-hmm.
have three young boys who I truly believe, are here for such a time as this. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I always say we're raising tender warriors. Like they need to know how to fight, but do it with love. And our life
Mm-hmm.
story has certainly taught them that, at very young ages. It was hard to describe to our boys what happened to their
Mm-hmm.
father.
How old were they, do you think, by the time they could understand that?
It was for all three of them, it was about 6 years old.
Yeah, that's kind of when you can start to reason with kids, right? Is between
Yes.
around 6 or 7 years old. So,
Mm-hmm.
mm,
And they started to understand, that another human being tried to kill their father.
mm,
And instead of killing him, that suicide bomber took his eyes, and that took something from them.
mm-hmm,
So they
mm-hmm,
had to work through forgiveness and,
right.
work through, we've had to really work on, like, humanity isn't all bad. Like there
Let's
are,
talk about forgiveness for just a
yeah,
minute more because
yeah,
that's super important.
yes,
You know,
it's,
forgiveness without it, we're
yeah,
lost. So
yes.
how did that happen that you taught them forgiveness?
Um, because I had to do it myself.
Uh-huh. Right.
And it
Right.
wasn't easy. I had to do a lot of work because I started to realize that I was mad at God, even though I had trusted Him and believed
Mm,
Him and was so blessed by, the life that He sort of gave back to us because of that faith and that belief. But there was a part of me that was mad. And
mm,
not mad at the man, who blew himself up, but there was also parts of me that were sort of, even mad at Scotty a little bit. Um, like, why did you choose that? Why were you in that position? Were you not thinking about me and our future? And, all those things that go through our
mm-hmm,
minds and
mm-hmm,
really our hearts and just our being. And so I had to do a lot of work to realize that not forgiving Scotty, and then acknowledging that I don't have to be mad at God, I need to fully forgive, really brought me a lot of peace, and allowed me to move forward. And so that's how I believe I was able to share that with my boys.
mm-hmm,
um, and I just talked to them about my own process of forgiving and grief. And they all, they have had each other. So it was interesting because the older one said to the middle one, I felt the same way, Graham, and, work through it. But so I think being a mom is one of the greatest jobs that we have today ever. And so, raising our three boys and being a teammate and wife to Scotty. But in addition to that, I also ran for United States Senate this last cycle. And people were like, who is this woman who just came out of the woodwork and took Washington State by storm? And again, it was, I knew that we needed leaders of integrity and leaders who will stand up and do what's right for the American people. And our family obviously has skin in the game in this country. We have sacrificed greatly for it. And so I took on this additional challenge. I had spent many, many years going to Capitol Hill and Washington, D.C., and working with senators, working with the White House, working with congressmen and women to enact change for our veterans, for the VA. And so I'd spent a lot of time in government with advocacy and fighting and speaking and doing everything I could, back to those sort of how I was talking about at Walter Reed, where I was crumpled on the floor and wondered, how am I going to help everyone else? Sort of like lived up to that calling and spent a lot of time fighting. And so, I'm an entrepreneur. I have, I've started businesses, and both me and my husband speak all over the country, but the greatest calling was to stand up and continue the fight for our country. And so I was up against, it was very much so a David and Goliath situation, but when you win David and Goliath situations in your life, you're not afraid of very much. And so I truly believed in my heart. My husband was behind me all the way. In fact, he was the one who sort of pushed me out the door and said, Tiffany, you need to go do this. You need to fight. And we put up an incredible fight. And it was truly amazing to see what we accomplished, although not the outcome any of us wanted. I didn't win. But we stood up for a lot of people and brought their voices to the forefront. And we held my political opponent accountable. And that's something that hasn't been done in a very long time in Washington State. There's not a lot of accountability for our career politicians. And so in my eyes, I see it as a win. And I met incredible people along the way. And it certainly is what is continuing to inspire the work that I'm doing today.
So if you run for Senate and your opponent wins, then what position can you hold, or do you hold after that? Because I don't know anything about American. I have like very limited political knowledge in the States.
Yeah, you don't hold any office unless you win. Yeah. But then
all these people.
Yes. What was amazing about our campaign is, in some regards, I was a political outsider. No one really knew who I was. But we were able to build really something amazing. And we were able to build like a huge base of people who were never really involved politically before. But they really...
How did you go about that?
So
explain to my listeners.
Yes. So because of my work in DC, I knew a couple of people in politics, and so just built a team that believed in our vision, believed in what we were doing, and just, you announce and then you hit the ground running, and you have to raise money. You have to raise a lot of money. We ended up raising over $20 million, which is just crazy. But that's what it takes. And we were able to connect with people all over the United States who just really connected with my story, my vision. Like people could really grasp, the essence behind our campaign and what we were doing. So it's really, I always say it's like starting a business, but super fast. Like you got to build it and grow it, to multi-millions within 18 months. So seriously, like building from the ground up, and then, which is incredible what we were able to do. I had an amazing team who I'm still working with to this day. And so although we didn't win, you are correct, Tammy, that you build relationships with people and connections with people that you otherwise wouldn't have. And, I always think too, like, especially for Washington State, like we're just in a really bad place politically, a lot of partisan politics, and it's not benefiting the people. And how do you know though? How do you gauge where people are at if you don't put up a tough challenge? If you don't stand up and fight, how do you know how to win in the future? Like it's almost necessary. And so we learned a lot. It's certainly inspiring my work that I'm doing today and continuing to fight and be involved in politics because, as women, I know that I have to do this for the future of my children. And I cannot look them in the eyes and say, like, I had an opportunity to do something to hedge against and protect your future, and I didn't because of my own comfortability or, because of my own security or whatever. I want to look at them and say, no, I continued to fight and chart a path for you to have opportunity and a voice in this country. And so I don't have any regrets. It was an incredible experience. I mean, United States politics can be very, very nasty. But at the end of the day, I really believe it's what you focus on. And if you focus on people and just focused on making an impact, I have no regrets. And I truly believe, I told someone not too long ago, they were asking me how I felt because it is hard. It's a loss and process of going through, the feelings and everything that you poured into something. But I said, my life has never been built on wins. It's always built on losses.
Yeah. Isn't that something? It's true that our lessons in life are built on suffering.
Yes. Yes.
And, when you're young and nothing's really happened in your life that's set you back, it's hard to believe that could be the case, that you could even learn more.
Yes.
If you put yourself forward into the fray and suffered, you'd learn more. I mean, it makes sense, but it's hard to believe.
It is. And it's not easy.
No.
But, nothing worth fighting for is easy.
No, I mean, did you find the love of your life and just say, hey, here I am? Is that all there was to it? No. Nobody. That doesn't happen to anybody. So what do you do now then? Because it sounds like you're still politically active.
Yes, I am still politically active. So through our campaign, I love sharing this story because we started with 0 emails, like no one, we started with nothing. It's not like I jumped into this with this huge database, we started with nothing. And we were able to build a very large, in fact, one of the largest in the country, small dollar donor bases, which shows that people really resonated with my story. And the hope and the vision that we brought. And so I'm able to use that to help other candidates. So I launched Endeavor PAC. And I love the word endeavor because it means to finish the race. And, we will never stop running the race. And so Endeavor PAC will be able to support I'm looking for like political outsiders, people with real life experience that they can bring to the halls of Congress. And so our PAC will support those types of candidates in their efforts. We can certainly help just propel them, get their voice out, make sure they get through the primary election and then on to victory.
Mm.
In addition, I have launched, or I'm chairman of Rescuing the American Dream. So it's a policy pack
Mhm.
where we're doing a lot of research, and really going, politicians in the United States like to take their ideas and impose them on the people, or say, this is what we think
Mhm.
is best. What do you think? We're taking a completely different approach, and we're just going to the people and saying, what are your hopes, fears, and dreams? And then developing policy around what the American people are telling us. And then our greatest challenge, and this is what we are working on, is how we communicate those policies to the American people, to where it makes sense to them, to where they feel like they have hope again, and can really believe that government can be good. So those are my projects that I'm working on going forward, and it's great. It's exciting. I think there is an open lane in this country to just have real, honest conversations and try to keep sort of the politics out of it and just talk about solutions.
Mhm. This sounds like, well, if I'm thinking of the Bible, then the story of Exodus, which Jordan studied over many, many hours and with a number of different scholars, and I listened to it all. So I learned a lot more about
Mm-hmm.
Exodus than I had before. And the idea of subsidiarity, so that
Mm-hmm.
because if government is governing, like you said, politicians like to think they have the answer and then they impose it. But that's not what it says is the way to do it. It's that you take the people at the bottom, right? You take the people at the bottom, you put them together, you find a leader out of those people, and you put them, that one
Mm-hmm.
person on top. But you deal with things at the lowest common denominator. And we've forgotten that in our politics, and not just in the
Yes.
States, not just in Canada. It's a real top down tyranny
Mm-hmm.
now. And the people, it hollows out the middle. And then
Mm-hmm.
the people at the bottom are
Mm-hmm.
just in a mess. And I
Mm-hmm.
think the States is, I don't know, but I imagine it's in better shape than Canada. But we're suffering for sure from not paying attention to these old biblical political
Mm-hmm.
ideas. Who
Mm-hmm.
knew? I didn't know that was there. Who knew?
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. And, I think, for our family, I always say, never in a million years was it in my plan to get into politics. Like,
Right.
our family did not want to be in politics, at
I
all.
never did either. No,
And here
no.
we are. I wanted to be a nurse. And in fact, I had to sort of reconcile that with myself as well, because there was a part of me too for a little bit where I was feeling bad, for myself. I was feeling sorry for myself and my career, and that it wasn't the career I thought I was going to have. And then I said, wait a minute, Tiffany, like you need to think outside of the box here, because you're still doing nursing. You still have that heart and education of a nurse. You're just doing it in a different way. And it's in
Hmm.
politics, it's where our pathway led us. And never in a million years did I think that my life would lead this way. But you're absolutely right. I have felt that pressure from the government, like coming down on you, or saying, I felt that really strong on me and Scotty in those early years of the government saying, here, we're here to help. We say, anytime the government comes to you and says, we're here to help, run for your life,
Hmm.
because they're not. Um, and I really felt that oppression at a young age, and knew that we had to break free of it. And we do live in the greatest country on earth. I believe the United States is the greatest country on earth, because in what other country, like I did, stood up and fought for my husband for something different, took on the Department of Defense, and they said, okay, actually, this idea might work.
Hmm. They listened. Mm.
They listened. They did. And there's still a lot more work to do. And I still believe in that. Maybe it's just a little glimmer of hope. But I still believe in that for this country. And I know if this country can emerge and show that to the rest of the world, we all will be better for it.
Yeah, well, all of us. And I mean, that's why I have this podcast. And I was
Yes.
not a person who wanted to have a podcast. That wasn't that wasn't who I was. And I wasn't the person who spoke. And now I
Yeah.
go on tour with my husband. I get up on stage and I speak to people. That's not who I was.
Yeah.
I didn't see that, but I was speaking with Deborah Gaines yesterday, and we
Hmm.
met Deborah in Seattle when we were there with you.
Mm.
She was sitting beside Princess Seattle, Deborah
Hmm.
Gaines. And
Hmm.
I spoke to her yesterday, and she said that her husband was a writer. She wasn't a writer.
Oh.
And then came and told her to write a book, and she said, "Yeah, but I'm not a writer." He said, "I told you to write a book." And so she
Yes.
began to, but she said it took her months not
Hmm.
to not to stop that narrative in her head thinking, "I'm not a writer."
Mm.
That's a limitation that she had put on herself.
Yep.
And I thought, oh, that's such a good thing to think. Jordan's the public speaker. I'm not the
Hmm.
public speaker.
Hmm.
But who am I to limit myself that way? And
Yes.
it seems like such a strange thing for me to even say that, because it sounds like boasting in a way, but
Hmm.
it's really, I'm trying to care for myself, support
Hmm.
myself.
Hmm.
And that's a very tricky thing to learn to do, to
Hmm.
support ourselves. Yeah.
Hmm.
So you've learned to become a new person, a different
Yes.
person.
Yes. And I think that's important as women, or for women, especially now. We need our voices to be heard.
Yes, we
Um,
do.
and I love it. We were in a conversation just a couple weeks ago, and someone was asking my husband about politics, and more so like conservative ideals and conservative politics. And my husband said, well, I think a lot of the problem is we don't have enough women's voices in conservative politics. And I thought, wow, what a wise thing for him to recognize and see. Because like we were kind of talking about, women really have this unique ability to be fully present in the
Mm.
current moment, while also hedging against protection in the future.
Mm-hmm.
It's how we're made, it's how we're created, it's what we do for our babies. It's,
Mm-hmm.
even recently, and I don't know why I've been thinking of this, but just the beauty and the awness of growing another human being inside of you. Like
Mm-hmm.
that alone, people ask, like, what is your greatest accomplishment? And I'm like, giving birth to my three sons. I mean, truly
A
a
miracle.
miracle, a
Yeah,
miracle.
that's right.
Um,
That's a miracle.
and you
And
think
it
of
look,
those,
and you just watch any woman have a baby. I watched my daughter have a baby.
yes,
Like, my daughter didn't want to go to the hospital and she didn't want any drugs. So she
yep,
had the baby at home.
yep,
And the midwife was there, but her person who was supposed to help her wasn't there. So that
hmm,
was me. And so I
mm,
was helping my daughter have a baby, and I have never seen anything
yes,
as beautiful. It was like
yes,
a majestic animal in the
yes,
forest giving birth.
mhm,
It was absolutely the most amazing thing I've ever seen.
yes,
And I can't believe that I have that memory.
oh,
And we
yes,
don't, like, talking about that's a good thing to talk about, because I think women don't have babies because they're scared to have them now. They're
yeah,
scared to give up their what they think is the wonderfulness of everything they have,
mm,
to give something. But God, having a baby, that is a gift that you can't even compare to anything else.
I agree. It
Yeah.
gives me goosebumps, like
Yeah.
hearing you share that story. It truly, I, I had, and I don't, whatever anyone chooses to do, I doesn't matter. But I'm more of a
No.
holistic, natural person, and so I had my babies naturally too, because I
Mm-hmm.
knew I didn't want any interventions. I knew my body was made for it, and I knew I could do it. And they're just something so beyond amazing about the pain, and even how that applies. to life. And even,
Mm.
the work that I do now, like, it's interesting. Even someone's like, how are you so strong? And I thought, well, I mean, women are really strong. I don't know where we get this, conception that, or perception that we're weak or something, or like that I couldn't handle politics. I'm like, I birthed 3 babies, all natural. Like, I pulled my husband up out of the pit of destruction. Yeah, women can do really hard things. And
Yes.
we need that voice in all levels of our government. And having, I think my fire and my inspiration, and certainly that drive and that calling in the work that I'm doing now, still in politics, is because of my kids. Like, they didn't take anything from me or from my career, or they gave me more.
They taught you more
They
about
taught
yourself.
me, and yes. And there's nothing like, even I think raising them now, seeing their humanity and their sin, and the struggles and all the things you work through, it's also a reflection of me and a reminder to me that I'm still a work in progress.
Right. Right.
I'm still working on things as well, and they're a direct reflection of me. So if my boys are doing something bad or acting a certain way, I've started to take a mental check of, what am I doing?
Mm-hmm. Is there
And
anything I might be doing?
yes.
Yeah. Right. Right. Mm-hmm.
So, I think my kids are certainly the reason that, me and Scotty will never stop fighting, and they've enriched our lives in so many ways.
I have 3 grandkids now. I'm
Oh, that's
starting over again.
it's so wonderful.
We went through childhood. We learned what we could.
Yep.
Then we became parents and we learned what we could. Now I have one more chance. I have one more chance. I have these little kids.
Yes.
And I can learn what I can from them and teach them what I can.
Yeah.
This is I get another chance. I feel so
It's
grateful
beautiful.
that I get to do this again. I don't know who I was talking to, but she said when she meets little kids that are causing trouble
Yeah.
in school or whatever, she goes to them and she says, "You're a leader. You're different than the other kids. You're a leader. What would a leader do?
Yes.
Do the things that leaders do, because that's who
Yes.
you are." It's pretty wonderful. When I was
Yes.
very, very sick and the doctor told me I wasn't going to live, and I came home to tell my son I wasn't going to live, he looked at me, and it completely changed the way I understood life to be. And I've always wondered and tried to understand what it was I saw that day. But I think what I saw was he loved me more than I loved myself.
Aww.
And that made me worth saving.
Yes.
And that's really something, that your
That's
child.
beautiful.
Yeah, wow. That just blows me away every time I think, is that really what happened? That something like that happened.
Yes.
Because, all of a sudden I knew that it wasn't up to me anymore. That, the doctor had his opinion, but he's a man.
Yep.
He can
Yep.
make mistakes.
Yep.
Just like I can make mistakes, but God makes no mistakes.
That's right.
And he'll decide whether I'll live or die, but it's not up to me anymore. And I remember, I just figured that out at that moment. And it was all because of my love of my son for me. It was like, wow. There's lots of reasons to have children.
Yes.
There are no reasons not to have children, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, somebody might have made that decision, and fair enough. But wow.
Yeah.
I don't know. There's so much to learn from that experience.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Right? My sister came up
Absolutely.
to me just before I had my first baby, and she said, "You're going to join a club that you've never been a part of." And she said it's called the Parent Club. And I was like, yeah, okay. And then I had a baby, and sure enough, as soon as you have a baby, all of a sudden people start talking to you, but they talk to you as a parent.
Yes.
And you're part of this club now. I'm not Tammy, the 20-something-year-old youngest daughter of, I'm a parent. And
Yes.
that was so cool.
Yes.
It finally wasn't about me anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I was such a thrill.
Yeah.
I could go home and just say, here's my baby. And that was the main event,
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. There's so many reasons to have children. It's, yeah, it's really worth a conversation about those
Absolutely.
kids.
Absolutely.
About those kids.
Yep. And
How,
I think,
how old are your kids? How old are your kids?
Yeah, so I have 16-year-old, all boys, 3 boys, 16, 14, and 10.
Oh, wow.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's all fun, but that's a good fun time too.
It is. It is. And, like I said, we're learning just as much as they are. And, and it's interesting, even in politics, some of the interviews or different situations I've been in. And I don't like how people do this, but hopefully it'll change someday in the future. But, they always treated me like I couldn't get into politics, or I couldn't do certain roles or be a part of something because I was a mom.
Oh.
And I always thought, like, but I'm here because I am a mom. I am qualified because I am a mom that can actually do this work and do it well. It is possible to also still be a good mom.
Yeah, kids look to their mothers to see what they've done in their life. So,
yes.
You want to make sure that whatever is shining inside you, that you bring it out.
Yes.
Because your kids are looking to see what that is, so that they can bring out whatever is within
That's right.
them.
That's right.
Yeah, I think so.
Yes, I agree. And even, even getting into politics, and some people would say, like, oh, why are you doing this to your kids? And I said, I am showing them what's possible. I'm not
civic
bringing
duty.
harm. Civic duty, absolutely. And then also facing scrutiny and criticism and handling it with grace and with love and with poise. And, when I lost the race, my boys were devastated. My youngest cried and he didn't understand, because he would come with me to the events, and he was on my bus tour, and he saw the hundreds of people, that were coming and loved us and loved our message. And he thought, my mom is winning, in his mind, my mom is winning. And so when we had to tell him how it, all came out, he was so sad. But then also he got to see a mom also be sad, and then rise up. Yes. And then stand back up and dust herself off and get back in the fight.
That's right. It's not the mistakes we made. It's how we get up after the mistake.
That's right.
Or whatever you want to call it. But the setback, it's not the setback. It's how you deal with the setback and then get back on your feet. Yeah.
And for a mother to model that to their kids is invaluable.
Oh, yeah.
And, that's part of the reason why I'm grateful for the whole experience, the whole political experience, because I have no idea how that will affect my boys in a positive way in the future.
That's right. All we can do is do the next right thing.
That's right. Yes. Yeah, it's really simple, right? I think
sounds simple, doesn't it?
We complicate our lives so much sometimes, right? We do, and we let so many voices come in and thoughts and, sometimes confusion, but really it's just do the next right thing.
Yeah, that's right. But you gotta, in order to do the next right thing, you have to stop.
Yeah.
And you listen, and you have to listen, right? Yes. Because otherwise you won't know what the next right thing is.
Yes.
And we have so much coming in, like you said, so many different things.
Yes.
It's hard to have time to listen. And, because you're listening, but you're listening to other things, but just listening with not anything else around. That's that's a special place. That's why
It
they teach
is.
meditation and prayer, and so you can be in a quiet place, so you can
Yes.
hear.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it can feel uneasy. I know
Yes.
it's hard for me to slow down. That space is very, very difficult because I think it brings up, a lot of things that you need to deal with, that maybe you don't want
Mm-hmm.
to, or, um, but it's so necessary. I agree. That's something in my life that I've really had to work on, because I'm so action based, right? It's like take a step, take a move, and action. Like I'm always trying to solve a problem, solve a problem, solve a problem. And but I think the real skill, like that's great, but the real skill is stopping and listening and being quiet and asking, what do I need to know,
Right.
learn, and what's my
Asking.
next step?
Yeah. 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 When I was learning this new thing, awareness,
Mm,
acceptance, action.
mm-hmm,
So
mm-hmm.
I was busily going awareness, action, awareness, action, awareness, action. And I was going along and going
Yep.
along. And then one day I was in my basement and I thought, awareness, action. Oh, I thought I was just, when I was being aware, I was accepting, but I wasn't. I was just kind of forgetting about accepting because it's kind of elusive, this
Yeah.
accepting. It's kind of nothing, right? It
Yeah.
seems like kind of
Yes.
nothing. But yet it's practically everything. Like the
Yes.
action is the end result. It's not this acceptance in the middle. What are you accepting? That's the question.
Yeah.
And we don't often ask that, do we? We become
Mm-mm.
aware of a problem. Okay, here's the problem. Well, then there's the action. Well, actually,
Yes.
no. What is the problem? Are you blaming other people for it? Right? Are you
Yes.
blaming yourself for it? Like, you got to think these things through and try to find acceptance. Otherwise, you don't know what the right action is.
Mm-hmm.
Huh, I didn't know any of this, but anyway, I'm learning.
It's yes, it's so true. And it's a hard space to spend time in too.
Uh huh. Uh huh. It is. That is hard. That's why, I started doing yoga when I was 13. I
Mm-hmm.
stopped going to church.
Mm.
Shouldn't have done that, but I did. And I started studying yoga, but I learned to meditate.
Mm-hmm.
And when I decided to go back to the church and to go back to the Bible and learn the
Mm.
scriptures and begin to pray, I had a practice of meditation already. So the practice of prayer was
Oh, yes.
second nature,
Mm-hmm.
And I had no idea that that's what I was. You just don't know when you're doing
Yes.
something when you're 13. I thought I'll need this when I'm older, but I didn't know how.
Yeah.
We learn things when we're young and we have an inkling, oh, this might be useful someday. And that's a good thing to recognize because
Mm-hmm.
it probably will, because anything you do is useful, but those things you think might be useful probably will. How they'll be
Mm-hmm.
useful? Well, that's up to life to
Mm-hmm.
teach you that.
That's right.
Yeah, very
Yep.
interesting.
Yes.
So you're helping people, you're helping conservative people who have a who aren't well known,
Mm-hmm.
but they have, you said, the vision.
Mm-hmm.
Can you explain the vision that you are
Yes.
looking for?
Yes. It's, people that have real world experience. So have fought in the trenches, whether it's building businesses, um, doctors, whatever that, nurses, military spouses, service members, a wealth of just real life experience. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
in some regard, people who have lived under the laws that Washington, D.C. has created. I think that's the downfall sometimes of our political system is you get career politicians who don't even know what the
Oh.
real world is like. They don't even know what it's really
Mm.
like to live under the laws that they create. So I think, for the future of our country, we have to get just people in there that have that real world experience. And then, for my campaign, we created a whole agenda. My whole policy base was for recovery and reform, turning crisis into hope. And
Mm-hmm.
so I'm looking for candidates who are able to create their own platform of vision, whether it's the economy or our children's education or healthcare. Like, I want them to bring their real life world experiences into the policy and not just
Mm-hmm.
copying and pasting maybe someone else or just the typical talking points. Like, I want the candidates to have the vision um, for their campaign and their efforts for the future of this country.
How do you help them find a vision?
Well, I mean, they are going to have to find it themselves. I'm happy to help, like, with the policy side of it. For us, it was, like I mentioned, turning crisis into hope. So we focused on
Mm-hmm.
policies, to combat homelessness, our healthcare system, the economy, lowering costs of goods and services for hardworking families, ensuring that mothers had access to childcare, and had a hand up instead of a hand out. So I think these, the candidates that we're looking for will be able to have crafted that to a certain extent themselves, but happy to come right alongside them and help guide them through our experiences, and certainly what I learned through the campaign. And I'm more than happy to share our policy ideas, our policy, especially what we're getting back from rescuing the American dream. I think the more people that can use that and implement it, the better our country will be.
I see. I see. So these
Mm-hmm.
are people who've already they've all they're already on a campaign trail, and
No,
then they
not
come. No.
not necessarily. No, no, but accomplished in their own right in the private sector.
Uh-huh. And maybe
Mhm.
they're thinking of
Yes,
going into public life. Ah, I see.
yes, correct.
Hmm.
Hmm.
You know, just one thought came to my mind was Jordan's self-authoring program, his future authoring program, that helps
Oh,
people design a vision for 3 to 5 years
oh,
down the road.
oh, I
And
love
I did
it.
that program when it was pencil and paper, years and years ago. And
Yeah.
I thought it was the most important thing that he had done because
Huh.
it wasn't just pragmatic, it was spiritual, but it
Mm,
didn't seem spiritual.
mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
didn't know that that's what it was, but
Mm-hmm.
now I know that's what it is. But it only takes about they've done it quickly. You can do it. I have one of my friends doing it. She's been doing it for 3 days. So you can take a long time to
Oh,
do it, but you can also do it in 90 minutes.
how do you
And
access
I
it?
think it's $15. So it's not
Oh,
expensive. Yeah. So it's cheap. So it's called selfauthoring.com. And
okay.
then he has the past authoring, the present authoring, and the future authoring. Past authoring is like an autobiography, but it's for somebody whose the past keeps coming back and
Mm,
they need to process something,
mm-hmm.
right? So then
Mm-hmm.
they do an autobiography. The present, it's about faults and virtues. So you're identifying
Mm,
who you are in the present. And then the future is if I was someone that I was taking good care of and I wanted to, and now it's 3 to 5 years in the future, who would that person be?
mm, mm,
And then to
mm-hmm.
dream about it, and
Mm-hmm.
then to write about it for 15 minutes without editing or anything. Just dream. Who could that
I
be? I
love
wonder
it.
who that is.
Yeah.
And then to outline goals and how important they are to you, um, and any kind of goal. So I had health goals, career goals,
Mm,
life goals. And the thing about the future authoring is you can get people to write goals for their career,
mm,
and you can have people design a vision for their life. And the people who design the vision for their life, they miss less work.
mm.
So that's one thing. So it makes
Yeah.
them more resilient. And kids in universities have done this, and
Uh-huh.
it cuts the dropout rate like crazy. Like
Wow.
really, like the kids who are doing the worst are lifted. which is an
Ah,
unusual thing to happen, right? Because often
yep.
it's the people who are already doing well that do better.
Mm-hmm.
But this isn't the case. So in the Netherlands, they did it, and they did it with Dutch women,
Mm-hmm.
Dutch men, immigrant women, immigrant men, and the immigrants in a year caught up to the Dutch.
Mm-hmm.
And it's about being motivated. And men,
Mm-hmm.
like women, like you say, we are something else. Women, we can
Mm-hmm.
follow rules. I just
Yeah.
went and gave a commencement speech at a girls' school,
Yep.
and these girls, they were all on the honor roll, like all of them. It seemed, you know what I mean? We're very good at following rules and getting the work done. We're
Yep.
amazing at that. But
Yep.
men, they certainly need a vision. I'm not saying women don't,
Yeah.
but even in grade school, they need to know why they're there in
Yeah.
their own, in their own skin. And
Yeah.
so this helps them find that vision, and then
Yes.
they go with it. Yeah. So
Oh,
we
I
could talk
love
further
it.
about that, but it's very helpful.
Yes. Well,
So
I
you
I
might be
might
able to
have
use that.
I might have my 16-year-old look into
Oh
that
yeah,
too.
he's ready.
I
Oh, he's
uh-huh.
ready.
He
Yeah.
is.
Well, he's old
Yep.
enough for this program, I say. Yeah. When you're
Okay,
younger,
say
you think, I want to be an Olympic,
yeah.
I want to be a football star. Like there's a lot of things that kids say when they're younger that because they can only think about 6 months into the future.
Mm,
But when you get to be old enough, you can start to think more of
yeah.
3 or 5 years in the future. And that's when you're really ready.
Yeah. No, I could see him being ready because that's how he talks. It's like he wants to know how things are going to be helpful to him in the future. It's like, I want to play basketball, but just for fun. He says, I'm not going to be in
Right.
the NBA. So what's the point though? What's the
Hmm.
point? He's trying to find what is serving him now that will be beneficial in the future. He's trying to figure that
Right.
space out. Hmm.
Oh, yeah. 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 Well, that
Hmm.
is the thing, because you have to have a vision, but then you have to know what to do today, tomorrow, and the next day.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. And that's what this program is for.
Oh, I love it. Say it one more time. The
It's selfauthoring.com. I'll send it
selfauthoring.com.
to you in an email.
Perfect. I love it. Yes, I absolutely will check it out and do it. I'll do it myself and then
Well,
would
it's a
love
really
to
good
use
thing
it.
to do in transition too. So
Yeah.
say you finished your Senate race, and
Yep.
then you've begun something else at the beginning of that, like when you're finding your way again.
Yep.
That's a really
Yeah.
good time to do it. When your kids leave home, that's another
Yes.
time. Oh,
Yeah.
it's time to do because who am I now? I don't know.
Yep.
And yeah,
Yep.
right?
That's the thing about life, right? And I
Yeah,
always that's what I'm trying to teach my boys, and I'm continuing to learn it myself still too as well. But it's like life always changes, and the more you can adapt, right? The more you can adapt and overcome, the more successful, healthy, happy we will be. But I think
yeah,
our human tendency is to constrict and protect, right? And to get into a comfort zone and to surround yourself with normalcy. But we have to be able to override our system. Um,
well, when we
and
have good community too, we can do
yep,
that. If you have
yes,
good community, then you
that's
can
right.
you can venture off, but
Yep,
know that you're somewhat protected, at least by people that
yep,
you can really depend on.
that's right.
So I really advocate for community. I think that that's
Yep,
something that we don't stress as
yep.
as much as we need to. Isolation, you don't have
Mm,
any strength in
mm,
isolation.
no,
So
nope, you're absolutely
yeah,
right.
so kids,
And
kids, they're in high school, they have all their friends, and then they leave high school and go off to university. They leave their community.
mm-hmm,
So you have to make
mm-hmm,
sure that some of these people that you stay in touch, that you have to, and maybe you broaden out who's in your community, broaden
mm-hmm,
it out, and
mm-hmm.
so that you can land in different places. And
Yes.
yeah, it's you kind of got to think strategically about how you need to set yourself up, because crisis is going to hit,
Yeah. Yep.
and you're going to need that support.
Yep. Yep.
even
It's
if you
so,
don't really want it around.
so true. And, I tell my boys this, and I have to live it out myself, but it's easy to look at successful people, or like you were saying, NBA stars or basketball, football
Mm-hmm.
stars, or just super successful people in the public eye. And it looks like they did it alone. It looks like, they're super intelligent or incredibly gifted athletically, which a lot of them are, yes, but they did not do it alone. No one, I don't
No.
care who you are, you do not do it alone in this life. There is
No, and
absolutely no
probably if you're
way.
alone, it's doubtful that you'll
Yep.
put yourself out there,
Yeah.
because you need support
Yes.
and encouragement.
Yes. Yep. And a safe
Hmm.
place, right? When crisis
And a safe
or
place,
you fail,
or just
right?
to recuperate.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Like
Yeah.
failure's not bad. Failure is not a bad thing.
Well,
Um,
it's what happens when you go out into the unknown, right?
yep. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Because if it's
Yes.
unknown, then you're not always going to win.
Right.
But that's where you
Right.
got to go.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's right.
Because when you know everything, you're in a tyranny.
Yes. Yep. There's
Ugh.
no free thought, right? There's no
We've
freedom.
seen a little of that,
Yes, we
and it's
have.
not a good thing. And it's not
Nope.
a good thing,
Nope.
right? So if people are going to not be in a tyranny, you have to be able to be, you have to be able to have a vision like
Yes.
you have, that you say,
Yes.
and to move forward on it. And what
Yep.
you're doing is you're lending people support to carry out their vision.
Yes.
Wow, that's great. That's like giving them a ship, a ship with,
Yes.
that's full of supplies, and then they're
Yeah.
going out on the sea.
Yes. And I always want to be for others what I never had. And I think that's
Mm.
how we use our skills and gifts to the fullest of their potential, that it isn't always just about us, or it wasn't just about me winning the Senate race, but I can take what I learned and what I gained and be for someone else what I didn't have.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Because you feel you did it pretty much by the seat of your pants.
Yeah, bootstrapped. Yeah.
But bootstraps. Yeah. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh. See? Yeah. So it's very interesting. You never know what you're going to learn and
Mm-mm.
what you're going to put into practice.
Yep. And that's what makes life exciting, I think.
Yes, it makes it
Mhm.
exciting. That's right.
Yes.
Um, otherwise, what happens? What happens otherwise?
Well, I think we don't use our full potential. We don't use our gifts to the
Yeah.
fullest of their abilities. And that can lead, like, to what we were talking about. That can then lead into places of isolation and loneliness and, a lot of fear. Um,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because when you're not living, your true potential, there's always there's going to be a rub in your spirit and in your, just who you are. And you can use that to isolate, or you can use that to propel you forward.
Yeah, definitely. You can use that to isolate. I know I've done that. I've
Yeah.
done that. I've had a tendency to do that. And I've, well, you got to work on yourself,
Yep.
because we're all a work in progress, like you
That's,
said,
that's right.
right?
Yep.
And get on top of things and get out there,
That's
make a
right.
difference,
That's right. Live
do
in
your
the
civic
fray.
duty.
I think you said that. I love that. Live in the fray.
Yeah, live in the fray. Well, that was lovely.
Yes. Thank you. You boosted
Good
my
luck with your
day.
endeavor. Oh,
Thank
that's
you.
nice. You boosted mine
Yes.
too.
Yes.
I thought, I
It was
wonder what we're going to
beautiful.
talk about.
I
You
think we
never
could
know.
talk. I think we could talk about a whole lot more.
I think we could too. You're fun to talk to. I like this.
Yes, this
So,
was good.
yeah, I'll send you the self-authoring
Awesome.
information. It'd be very
Wonderful.
interesting to see what your son, when does he turn 17?
So he just turned 16 in May. So he has a whole year.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So he has a whole
Mm-hmm.
year. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think he's old enough, but if he isn't, he can
I
always try it, and he can do it next year too.
Yeah. No, I think he's
But
ready.
yeah, well, you said you could talk to your kids at 6, so it sounds like
Yeah.
they're not slow learners. Sounds like
Mm-mm.
they're on the ball.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'm not
And
surprised.
they've had to be, with also what's interesting is they were all born after Scotty was blind.
Yeah.
And so the way that they think and process and like how they developed starting at a very young age is not typical. Um, and it was really interesting to see them, as little kids, because I didn't teach them and Scotty didn't teach them, but they would say instinctively they knew Scotty couldn't see. And they would say, Dad, look at my toy. And they would run to him and put it in
Mm.
his hand.
Mm-hmm.
And then,
Mm.
they would always automatically grab his hand because they knew he needed guided. And then if they went to a park, he would say, Grady, where are you? And Grady wouldn't say, I'm over here. He would he would get a rock and like hit it on the playground or something to make a sound.
Mm. Mm.
And we never taught them that.
Mm.
It's fascinating.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's learning a new language.
Yes.
They were learning a new language.
Yes. So they think and process in very, very unique ways. I see that now, more as they're getting older.
Interesting. I guess you'll see the effects of that for, as you go forward.
Yes.
And in their communication with each other and with other people. It'll be that'll be fascinating.
Yes.
Fascinating.
Yes.
Well, all the best to you and to Scotty and your 3 boys.
Thank you, Tammy.
And it was very, very, very nice to speak with you.
Yes, this was lovely. Blessed me today. So thank you.